Right, so we obviously have a lot to talk about in terms of what the fuck is going on over in Ukraine right now, because last night, Vladimir Putin, president of Russia and vicious imperialist warmonger, decided to essentially conduct not only an offensive military attack against the eastern portions of Ukraine that we've been mainly focusing on, but he decided to essentially invade and bomb the entire country. So a couple things that I want to say before we get into the details of what is happening on the ground right now. Number one, I obviously got this shit wrong. Right? My analysis so far was that I did not think that it was likely that he was going to conduct this type of an all-out assault immediately. Now, I'm perfectly willing to admit my own flaws and when I'm wrong on these types of things. So, there it is. I don't think that a lot of people anticipated that this was going to come immediately. Even the president of Ukraine himself said that this type of an attack was not imminent or anywhere on the immediate horizon. So, this is an absolutely catastrophic escalation by Vladimir Putin here, and he is the one that we should be primarily condemning in this entire process, because again, he completely ratcheted this up to an entirely different level and is essentially waging war on the entirety of Ukraine. What his motivations are kind of yet to be seen for exactly what he wants to do. Does he want to install a new government? Does he want to occupy it temporarily? We don't know, but we're going to get into a lot of that. Now, the second other thing that I want to say is this is obviously an ongoing war, so nobody is going to be able to put together perfectly accurate takes right now. It's chaotic. You have information coming from all different ways, people who want to serve specific narratives that suit their own interests. So we're just going to do our best with what we know right now. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get into it. They say here from the BBC, Ukraine invasion, Russia's attack in maps. So again, just to give you a perspective, this is not isolated to the eastern portions near the Donbass down here. This is what I thought was the most likely thing that was going to happen. I thought maybe he would send in troops to the Donbass region. Maybe if they were being aggressive, they would try to extend past the previously Russian separatist-held territories and expand into the Donbass. But as you can see here from the maps, okay, that is not the nature of this invasion, okay? They have been attacking basically all of these major cities all the way over from the western portion of Ukraine to the capital of Kiev here towards the north, as well as even Chernobyl, which is like roughly around this area as well. It seems like they completely took over the Chernobyl nuclear factory, as well as like many other military installations, airfields, airports, etc. But they are bombing, I mean, from the north, the east, all the way over to the west and the south, of course, down here by Crimea. So again, all-out invasion. This is not isolated to the eastern portions. This is a full-on militaristic assault. So that's the situation we have on the ground right there. I'll give you a little bit of perspective of visuals with some of the videos of the bombing. So take with this what you will. This is from Clint Ehrlich, who's been covering this conflict and has been doing a pretty good job, I think. He says, massive explosion from airstrike on Ivano-Frankivsk. Sorry if I'm completely butchering that name, but he says you can hear the terror of the civilians making the recording. It must feel like the apocalypse. So I'm going to go ahead and play this clip here. I'm not going to play it with audio though, but you can see the absolutely massive explosion in the distance there. So that's just one example of them targeting this with this airstrike here. A couple different ones. They targeted some army warehouses. Again, mostly been military installations right now from the reports that we've been seeing, but that does not at all mean that there are not going to be civilian casualties. There definitely have been so far, and there definitely will continue to be civilian casualties. But again, just another quick video perspective here. This is from a Ukrainian Air Force base that was struck. So again, mostly targeting military hardware right now, maybe trying to put a stranglehold on Kiev and back them into a corner to try to create some sort of justification for negotiations or concessions from the government of Kiev, but just absolute destruction on multiple different areas, multiple different cities, military installations around the entire country. They also launched a cyber attack. So Ukraine computers hit by data wiping software as Russia launched invasion. And this is also going to be a key component of how we move forward right now in terms of what the West does, what do our European allies, what does Joe Biden do today. He's going to be coming out and making announcements about sanctions, but how do we respond? Because this is the type of thing that could end up pulling us into this conflict directly. Is, if depending on the types of sanctions that we levy against Russia, they might see that as an act of aggression and then target us with cyber attacks. They already targeted the Ukrainian government, shut down many of their websites and primary functions for for their government. So they're clearly very capable when it comes to cyber warfare, and this is something that we as Americans need to be very careful about right now in how we approach this and try to be as de-escalatory as possible, given that the situation is only being escalated by Vladimir Putin so far, but try to be de-escalatory and not get ourselves in this downward spiral that could literally end up popping off into like a World War III nuclear holocaust. So, you know, at the end of the day, let's try to push towards peace as much as physically possible. But again, they got attacked with some cyber attacks. Then you had the Ukrainian president who officially cut diplomatic ties completely with Russia. Kind of understandable given that his entire country is being invaded right now. And he also urged average citizens to take up arms to defend their cities and localities. And he even said that he was going to provide average citizens with arms if they are able to go out and fight. So clearly he is not looking to do any major concessions right now or to try to give up power right now. It looks like a lot of Ukrainians, I mean, we're talking about a population of dozens of millions of people. I think it's roughly like 45 million people living in Ukraine, and a lot of them are going to be willing to take up arms to fight, to fight for their sovereignty. So it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. Hopefully we can keep the civilian death toll and casualty toll to a minimum, but it is really not looking great, okay? I want to be completely honest with you guys. It looks like we're about to see significant degrees of bloodshed here in the immediate future, but again, Zelensky saying, as he did the other day, that you will see our faces, not our backs, if you come into our cities. So you see the message that he's trying to send there. But we also had many people who are fleeing from the major cities, especially like Kiev, but fleeing from Ukraine in general. This is another major component of this entire crisis. There is going to be a massive wave of refugees who are fleeing from Ukraine, and they're probably going to be fleeing towards Poland. Belarus already said that they will not accept refugees, and Belarus is the country that is just to the north of Ukraine that actually helped Russia with this invasion. They were conducting military exercises with Russia over the last couple of months, but you can see here, I mean, just countless people are going to be fleeing this area, and they're estimating like upwards of 5 million refugees could be created by this crisis. So humanitarian absolute disaster that we have on our hands right now. So that's just one perspective. Another perspective is the absolutely gigantic balls on these anti-war Russian protesters who have actually taken to the streets, basically putting their lives on the line, putting their freedom on the line, because if you're going to go out there and oppose these actions by Vladimir Putin within Russia, you're facing whatever the security forces in Russia want to slap down on you. So, nothing but solidarity with these protesters who are, again, putting their own lives and freedom on the line here by showing up to protest Putin's actions. So absolutely love to see it. You can see they're literally getting pulled off the streets and arrested at these protests, which seem to be largely peaceful. But, again, just the absolute gigantic balls on all of these people to go out and, face their government like this. Need to see much more of this. But, that's one side of it. Brave protesters showing out. We also had the economic side of this that is important to keep up with, because although, the United States doesn't have a massive trade relationship with Russia, we're not mostly dependent on them for a lot of our imports. We're really more dependent on China, but Western Europe is definitely dependent on Russia for things like natural gas and fuel supplies, etc. So we're going to be seeing some pretty catastrophic global economic consequences to this entire situation that will end up hurting us here in the United States, especially depending on what types of sanctions that Biden wants to levy against Russia. But you can see here, just as one perspective in terms of how their economy is doing from the SERFs, they point out before suspending trading, the Moscow stock market exchange was down 45%. 45%. And he says, for context, in the Great Crash of 1929, the Dow dropped by only 13% and on Black Monday, and then on 11.7% on Black Tuesday, for a total of 23% in 2 days. So double what this crash was in 1929 during the run up to the Great Depression. So I don't know, looking pretty catastrophically terrible for Russia. And that kind of brings me to my last point here. We also had oil prices that are soaring, and worries mounting that this could affect, American citizens here at the gas pump as well. But, this kind of brings me to my final point, which is a lot of this depends on, a lot of the nature of how this is going to unfold moving forward, and whether or not the West or NATO or the United States gets dragged into this is going to be dependent on two things. Number one, what Vladimir Putin decides to do from here, and number two, what Joe Biden decides to do today in terms of what types of sanctions he's going to be levying. Because Vladimir Putin essentially said in his speech the other day, and I'm also going to be doing a bunch of different videos on specifics within this entire crisis that's unfolding to give deeper dives into all of this, but the the other day, Vladimir Putin, in one of his speeches, essentially said, any countries outside of this direct conflict that try to fuck with us, we are going to come back at you with full force, whatever that means. You know, some people are interpreting it as, you know, he's threatening to use nukes. Some people are interpreting it as he is, you know, threatening to cut off Western Europe from their gas supplies, etc. So there's a lot of different things that are still on the table and that are unclear, but it pretty much depends on, is Vladimir Putin going to continue this all-out assault? Is he going to try to install a new pro-Russian government in Kiev? Is he going to extend even further beyond the borders of Ukraine? Is this going to become a bleed-over conflict into other surrounding nations? That would be absolutely catastrophic. And on the flip side of that, you have, what is Joe Biden going to do? What types of sanctions is he going to do? Is he going to try to completely cut off Russia from the global banking system? If he did that, that would essentially could be interpreted as an act of war by Russia. So Biden is in a, you know, almost impossible situation right now where he has to, you know, impose some degree of consequences for Russia for doing this, while at the same time making sure that we don't get NATO troops dragged into this conflict directly, and also that we don't, you know, escalate the situation with sanctions that would, you know, hurt Russian civilians, or with sanctions that would push Vladimir Putin to interpret them as an act of war in and of themselves. So a lot of shit still up in the air. Obviously, again, chaotic war situation, so we're doing the best that we can with the information that we have, but Vladimir Putin just absolutely proving himself to be a psychopathic warmonger. This is a completely unacceptable move that he has done here, should be condemned by anybody who claims to be against capitalist imperialism. Vladimir Putin is an oligarch, a violent, repressive oligarch at the end of the day, so if you consider yourself to be on the left, oppose every single thing that he is doing right now, and that doesn't make you a you know, State Department spokesperson, that doesn't make you a NATO defender. You can have valid critiques of their own escalatory, you know, escalatory reactions to this entire situation and the expansion of NATO and all of that, but it's pretty clear who the major aggressor is here, so let's make that very clear for everybody.